everybody. You're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
I'm Brian Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And we are coming to you just a couple of days after the premiere of Black Panther, the latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe series of films. Before we go any further, let's just get it all out. This is going to be spoiler-ridden, so if you haven't seen the film yet, stop. We're just going to give you spoilers. There are other podcasts that do a very good job of stalling and giving you some content that is not spoilerific. We're a comic book podcast. We don't do that with our movies, so we're just going to get it all out.
We're totally going to launch right in and ruin the ending, I'm sure.
Okay, so...
Bucky!
Okay, yeah.
The ending.
Yeah, the ending. Yeah, okay. Okay, so before we start talking about Black Panther, I'm going to give you an encapsulation of the plot of the film. This is probably going to be too much information for you, but I'm going to speed through it. We'll see what happens. Okay, you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Now, again, T'Challa was introduced in Captain America Civil War. He's first presented to us as a prince of the remote country of Wakanda. At the beginning of Black Panther, they start the film many centuries ago. 5 African tribes warred over a meteor containing vibranium. A warrior ingested a herb that was affected by this mysterious metal, and they gained superhuman abilities. He became the first Black Panther. He united all the tribes, except for one, to form the nation of Wakanda. Over time, Wakandans used the vibranium to develop advanced technology, and they isolated themselves from the rest of the world by posing as a third world country. We then flash forward to 1992. King T'Chaka, the current Black Panther, travels to Oakland, California to visit his undercover brother N'Jobu. Black market arms dealer Ulysses Claw had infiltrated Wakanda and stolen vibranium, and T'Chaka accuses N'Jobu of assisting him, and through a series of quick impulses, N'Jobu is left dead. We then move to the present day, following T'Chaka's death at the hand of Zemo in the aforementioned Captain America Civil War. His son T'Challa returns to Wakanda to assume the throne. He and Okoye, the leader of the Dori Milaje, the army, they extract T'Challa's former lover Nakia from an undercover assignment so that she can attend his coronation ceremony, along with his mother Ramonda and his younger sister Shuri. At the ceremony, the Jabari tribe's leader Makambu challenges T'Challa for the crown in ritual combat. T'Challa defeats Makambu and convinces him to surrender rather than die for the sake of his people. As this is happening, Claw and this mysterious individual known as Eric Stevens steal a Wakandan artifact from a London museum. T'Challa learns that Claw plans to sell the artifact in an underground casino in South Korea. T'Challa, Okoye, and Nakia travel to the casino, where T'Challa learns that CIA agent Everett K. Ross is the intended buyer. After an amazing firefight in the casino and an amazing car chase, Claw is captured. Ross and T'Challa find that they are basically fighting the same fight. Then they are ambushed by Eric, who extracts Claw. Ross is severely injured, intercepting a bullet for Nakia. T'Challa notices Eric wearing a ring identical to his own. T'Challa decides to take Ross to Wakanda, where their technology can save him, rather than pursue Claw. We find that Eric is the son that N'Jobu left behind, as T'Chaka returning with him would complicate their lie that N'Jobu had disappeared. Eric would eventually grow into a U.S. Black Ops soldier, earning the name Killmonger. Killmonger then kills Claw, then takes his body to Wakanda. He is brought before the tribal elders, revealing his identity and claim to the throne. He challenges T'Challa to ritual combat. He defeats T'Challa and hurls him over a waterfall. Killmonger, who has become the Black Panther, prepares to distribute shipments of Wakandan weapons to operatives around the world. Nakia, Shuri, Ramonda, and Ross flee to the Jabari tribe for aid, where they find a comatose T'Challa rescued by the Jabari in repayment for sparing Makubu's life. T'Challa is healed by Nakia's herb. T'Challa requests aid from M'Baku, who declines. Yeah, we know where that goes. T'Challa returns to fight Killmonger, who commands his army to attack T'Challa. The Dora Milaje, joined by Shuri and Nakia, battle Killmonger, who dons his own Black Panther suit. Makubu and the Jabari eventually arrive to assist T'Challa. When confronted by Okoye, W'Kabi and his army surrender. Fighting in Wakanda's vibranium mine, T'Challa disrupts Killmonger's suit and fatally stabs him. Killmonger declines an offer to be healed and imprisoned, choosing instead to die a free man. T'Challa then establishes an outreach center at the building where N'Jobu died, to be run by Nakia and Shuri. Then in mid-credits scene, T'Challa appears before the United Nations to reveal Wakanda's true nature to the world, and then in a post-credits scene, Shuri continues to help Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, with his recuperation. That's what happened in Black Panther.
Was it?
Damn.
I know I didn't sell it for you folks, but that's what happened.
You
Yeah.
made it. That's quite an undertaking.
It's the whole thing.
There's a whole damn film. And now we're going to talk to you about what we thought of the film, and I'm going to start with, which you went first last time, and it was Brian. So, Steve, what did you think of Black Panther?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic. The funny thing is, I haven't been this excited about a movie since Wonder Woman last year. A superhero film since Wonder Woman last year, and I think obviously one of the biggest things that Black Panther represents is the idea of representation. Just the same way that Wonder Woman did. Wonder Woman was a film that showed that there could be a headliner female superhero for a blockbuster film. And this movie as well, Black Panther, kind of proves that you can have a black superhero headlining a film and have it do amazingly well. I think at this point it's smashed all the previous Marvel records, I think except for Avengers. But that's probably going to be broken at some point as well. I wouldn't be surprised. This is just it's just such an exciting time to be a comic book fan. And what's really interesting for me is that I've never been a Black Panther comic book fan. Like, I've never really read a lot of Black Panther except in teen books where he's making a guest appearance, or he's part of a team, or it's part of a crossover storyline. So I didn't know all that much about this character, his history, Wakanda as a whole, except where it's appeared in various forms in different series. And I was wrapped. I was along for the ride every step of the way. I thought it was incredible. I thought visually it was stunning. The actors were great. I love that they incorporated, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but Osa as one of the as the language of Wakanda, which is really cool. I did read a great article where a bunch of South African people who are native speakers were like, wow, the accents were terrible. But I just thought it was so neat to actually be able to see a film that featured an African language. Because we're so often reading, seeing all these films that have, Russian or German or French or whatever as being the, the foreign language of the day. But I loved it. I loved the female characters, which, a lot has been said about this, and we'll be saying a lot more about this, I think, of the strong female representation in this film. The character of Nakia, being sort of the former love interest of T'Challa, in her own right, being the spy who, does so much for a country that she's almost never there. But she's just such an integral part of what makes sort of Wakanda a soft power, or a sort of behind the scenes power. And then you've got, of course, Okoye, who is the head or the general of the palace guard, that really personifies just the the devotion of the Wakandan people to their king. It's this is a monarchy, it's semi-autocratic, but at the same time there's so much tradition and so much I guess collective interest in making sure that Wakanda continues, and that they maintain their place in the world, which is to see an African nation, even a fictitious one, just in such a wonderful light. It's rare. I mean, you rarely see a film that features anything that takes place in Africa as being a positive thing. And yes, there's some conflict that happens, with Wakabi and his tribe sort of turning against the king and wishing to sort of strike out and be very imperialist. But really, it's just a nation of people who want to work with each other and do wonderful things with each other, which, again, just being able to see that and not have it be a joke or a punchline or, seen as weaker than, and it's just wonderful. And of course that, the story itself is is kind of I would say, a standard Marvel story in many aspects. I was kind of annoyed by the fact that they, spoiler here, killed off both of the main antagonists, which Marvel has a problem with doing. Ulysses did make another appearance, of course, in Age of Ultron, where he was kind of introduced, but this one, he gets bumped off relatively early in the film, which surprised me. And Killmonger, although he's got such a great backstory and there's a lot more that they could have done with him if he had survived, of course, he also has to die, which to me, I don't want to say it's lazy screenwriting, because it's not lazy at all, but it's not really forward thinking. I think if they wanted to bring this character back to do something else. But everything else in it was exciting. I mean, just Angela Bassett, just being Angela Bassett, the queen, the queen mother. The fact that you have a mini Lord of the Rings sort of infiltration here with Andy Serkis and Martin Freeman, of course. But I loved it. I thought it was great. The music was fantastic, and I'm sure, Brian, you're going to mention that. Very exciting, very wonderful movie, and I definitely want to see it again.
Okay, let's go over to Brian. Brian, what did you think?
So I think the most important thing about this film is how diverse and beautiful the culture that they introduced in this is. I also, like Steve, just never really dug into Black Panther. Didn't resonate with me. It didn't see, representation certainly wasn't something I was looking at, but just street level to me always felt kind of like the sort of street level ish character. Black Panther's just been underutilized in really the last, well, maybe not the last 10 years, but before that certainly didn't always get his due. So seeing the world of Wakanda that I am a little more familiar with now because of the work of like Jonathan Hickman, Tahani Coates, and Jason Aaron, I certainly was excited when I saw the trailer and just realized exactly what this was going to be. And some of my friends who are of African descent, African American, but their excitement for this film made me excited, because I realized, like Steve said, with representation in Wonder Woman, for women, this is not just a story that resonates because it has women in very prominent roles all over the place, kicking ass and being amazing, but for people of dark skin, of African descent, this is such a sentinel moment for them, at least in cinema. And seeing, somebody posted a meme and they're like, oh, well, what about Blade? Blade was a black superhero. And it's like, yes, that is not to be taken away from, but he wasn't an African superhero. And when you see and you think about this world of Wakanda, which is fictionalized, of course, but is based on some somewhat, believable but real civilizations in Africa that were unfortunately decimated by colonial powers from the West. It's got to be breathtaking to see your heritage put up there on the screen in such a beautiful, vibrant, and also realistic way, like you said, Steve, with the language choice. So just witnessing that alone just made me so happy, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it from that perspective. Now, as a movie, I mean, it's a superhero movie, right? It's not bad. It's pretty good, actually. I would put it up there in some of the top Marvel superhero films. It's really good. It's very tight. The villain, quote unquote, is really more of an antagonist and somebody who has sort of a believable story to tell about kind of rediscovering his birthright, being frustrated and upset because of his father's murder, and seeking to take this immense wealth and technology from Wakandans who, have it pretty easy, and give it to the people who need it to fight the injustice that has been inflicted upon people from the African continent. And I believe it. Now, the guy who plays, is it Michael B. Jordan? And then, as Killmonger, the character has a few moments where you're like sympathetic, but overall the swagger he has maybe makes him a little less sympathetic, and just kind of like, okay. I mean, like, I don't know. It's interesting. It's very interesting because I've been reading some analyses of this film, and they all seem to agree that, he's not just a mustache twirling, I want to take over the world villain. And that's fantastic. But to the extent that they, portray this or do that, some people said it's a little too much. Some people said it's not enough. I mean, it's whatever. That's not my place to really say. But the music, I'm glad you brought that up, Steve, because as longtime listeners do know, I am a fan of soundtracks. And what this movie does, which is pretty cool, isn't just a soundtrack. It actually involved, for the album of original songs, they involved an amazing hip-hop talent, Kendrick Lamar, who I'm sure, a lot of our listeners are familiar with hip-hop. You've certainly heard of him. He was very recently robbed from getting some of the Grammys he deserved, but, lost out to other musicians for. So Kendrick Lamar is amazing, and his hip-hop is revolutionary. His production is just outstanding, and he brought some really nice and earnest songs to this movie. But the soundtrack itself, and this is something I've never heard of this guy, Ludwig Göransson, and I might just be totally missing out because this music was fantastic. It blended the more traditional African melodies and music styles and chants and songs, blended that with the traditional superhero orchestral, soundtracky type stuff, in a way that's pretty much just you don't hear very often in movies, because we don't have a lot of movies that are in Africa, and when they are, they're not necessarily going to use real quote unquote African instruments and textures and melodies. So I love this, and it's funny. I was sitting in the theater, and a guy a couple seats down was singing along, and I'm sitting there like, I mean, it was a kind of a repetitive chanting part during the credits, but I'm like, is this something that is known, or is this just him picking up and catching it and just being so moved that he wants to sing it? It doesn't matter. Either way, it's awesome. Some of my favorite moments are when they use the gamelan, which is a more, I thought, Indonesian instrument. It's got a very almost non-Western sounding intervals and notes, but pitches. But like, it was really cool texture, and every time I hear it in anything, I get excited. But yeah, no, this movie's great. Like, if you are someone out there who has kind of gotten tired of superhero films, I mean, go watch this. It's got all the tropes. You're going to know what's going to happen in a lot of places, but still, it doesn't matter. It's going to be so enjoyable. You're just going to like revel in some of the beauty and majesty that you see. I'm thrilled that this movie not only is so good, but it's sold out so much. I don't remember the exact number, but I'll tell you just from an anecdotal story, the theater I went to on a Sunday night was packed at 8 or 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Now, admittedly, it was a holiday today. We're recording on Monday, but still, like, come on, that's pretty cool. Like that, the movie's doing pretty well if it's packed on a Sunday night. Also, in terms of the bear part of this podcast, being a fan of the more meaty and hirsute people, the leader of the Jabari tribe.
Yeah.
Don't remember his name.
M'Baku.
The actor or the
either. I should have looked this up.
It's Winston Duke who plays M'Baku.
I kept trying to interject there, but my mic was off. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, no. So seriously, if you are a fan of the meaty and the hairy, good God. And what I didn't realize, and I thought I had read about this prior, is he's actually a character from the Marvel universe that has sort of a problematic superhero name.
Mm-hmm.
We all know about this? Okay. Man-Ape, which, okay, in this day and age, you're not calling someone who's from Africa a Man-Ape. That's not going to happen. I mean, that's his character name for Marvel, so, there's that. But they did it really well by just saying, no, he's just the leader of this tribe that worships the ape. And he's sort of the Jabari are sort of the outside, like, loner in the mountain tribe of Wakanda who they reject the Black Panther's worship of the panther god Bassett, and then they don't like the way the government is set up. So they always protest when there's a new king put out there. They're pissed off perpetually because of this and that, whatever. But as is any arc, you put out this character and then you don't kill him off. something's going to happen. You're going to see a relationship change, and of course they go through all that. So, but deliciously beautiful and quite a specimen of any person out there in the world. I would have sex with him, no question.
Well, and he also had one of the better lines in the movie too. Just one of the most memorable ones when Martin Freeman starts to talk when they're just showing up at the palace to talk about what they want him to do. This is after Killmonger's taken over and supposedly killed T'Challa. He starts talking and everybody starts barking at him, or making sort of, I guess, the ooh sounds. And M'Baku says, "Now you be quiet, colonizer, or I will cut you up in pieces and feed you to my children." And they all just sort of look at him, and he just looks terrified. And then they start laughing, and M'Baku's like, "Just kidding, we're all vegetarians."
Yes, that was so great.
Just his face at that, and just the way that he just kind of threw off that line.
That came at a point where we really needed it. This isn't humor dominated. Shuri definitely threw in a lot of yucks, but that came at a point where it was just so heavy and serious that we really needed to laugh.
Although the look of Lupita Nyong'o's Nakia sliding down a street in Busan and just the remaining seat from her, with just the look on her face was brilliant.
I was so freaked out they were going to kill one of those two off in that scene.
Oh yeah.
Holy shit! And then they turn it and make it a sort of a comedic beat. I was like, whoa, okay. Did you guys love Claw? Because let me tell you, Andy Serkis.
Oh my god. It is so refreshing to see him as an actor and not as CGI. Yes. Because he is a very, very strong screen presence.
He's also kind of attractive. I don't know what it is. Maybe it was just maybe it's the tattoos. Maybe it was his attitude, his kind of like, I'm just a beefy South African kind of, his weird sort of Cape Town accent that he had. I don't know.
Flirty and kind of manhandly with Martin Freeman's character. I was like getting a little vibe off that. I was like, hey, what's going on here? I mean, and he's got his like mixtape. Like I like that they played with that idea because obviously sound is a big thing for him, and like it was just. I was really bummed that they had to take that turn to make Killmonger, which is a stupid name, but Killmonger
I don't know if it's a problem for the Marvel films. A recurring theme is it suits the film fine. I don't know if it suits the franchise fine.
Yeah.
I think we've seen that with Quicksilver's death. There's a lot of things that you can cite where it probably would have been a better move if some of these characters had an extended presence.
Oh, I do have to throw it in. Michael B. Jordan looks pretty amazing in this.
Okay. I hate to be the guy to say that I didn't like the film. So I'm not going to be. I enjoyed it.
Okay, good.
But there are some issues that I had with it. And I don't know if you guys will agree with me. This film was so well cast from a supporting standpoint that in a lot of it, I felt Chadwick Boseman was almost a distraction or a bystander in his own story.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
I agree with that for sure.
I imagine if I saw the film a second time, that feeling would resonate even more strongly. To me, this film should be titled The Women of Black Panther, because the three Lupita Nyong'o, and I'm sure I'm butchering names here, Danai Gurira, is that how you pronounce her name?
Not sure.
And Letitia Wright, fabulous. Every one of them. I was riveted. One of the things that is so strong about this film is Afro-diversity. These are actors from very different points on the geographic spectrum. I think the film itself is a celebration of how diverse African culture can be, but I don't want to say Chadwick Boseman was weak, but as I said, there was this element that he was kind of the least important cog in the machinery. He didn't propel the story. It was the supporting cast that did, and that may have been a fault of the writers. You have to suspend belief with any of these comic book films when someone takes down an adversary. There isn't a scenario in real life that I can conceive of Boseman not being bested by Michael B. Jordan or Winston Duke. kind of took me out of the film a little bit. That was one element that I didn't buy.
Can I ask a dumb question? I just need to better understand this because it
Yep.
touches a little bit to your point. The plant that they take the little orb out of and crush it up and feed it, whatever the hell that thing was, the magic orchid, whatever. Did they give that to T'Challa prior to his first combat? Or did they? Okay.
Yeah.
So he had the
already
power. He had the power of the Black Panther when he fought the Jabari M'Boku. Is that right?
No, he didn't have the power.
That was
he
removed.
Actually had that
Yeah.
removed. So he'd actually had it in Civil War. So he's had it before, and I'm wondering if it was just sort of because he's the prince and he would be sort of backup Black Panther.
Well, right. So that was the
he'd already have
confusing thing, and that makes sense because then it's consistent with why they took it away from him when he fought Killmonger.
Yeah.
So okay, so that makes more sense. So neither time was he really using the power of the Black Panther magic thing to fight, and so yeah, it was up to him. Bill, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Both of those contestants, both of those, adversaries would have kicked his ass. But the other side of that is, it's your hero. You know he has to win eventually.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to get the shit kicked out. I mean, those fight sequences in pretty much any movie like this, they're always going to go the way you pretty much think they're going to go because it's just such a trope. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to just either you just don't do them, which is certainly one choice, and I think that may have even been a better choice, or just, do them like this and understand that people are going to know what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was very for me, and again, not to take away from his character, but T'Challa being an underdog king to me just didn't really seem to mesh with what I know about his character in the comics. And again, I don't know a lot. I haven't read a lot about Black Panther outside of how he appears in team books and in cameos and crossovers and whatnot. But he always seems to be basically either the smartest guy in the room or the most powerful guy in the room. He doesn't really have to do too much. He's got that same sort of Reed Richards behind a computer, kind of air about him, where if I wanted to do something, I would solve all of your problems. And seeing him here, where he's, and albeit it is kind of a semi-origin story, so it's early on. Right. Maybe he doesn't have the confidence and the experience and the understanding of who he is and his powers all there. But it's almost like he's a different character from how he appeared in Civil War, which at the beginning of the movie we hear is about a week prior to the present day start of the film. And if a week prior to him, taking the challenge to become king, he was this super confident, I know how to do all of this stuff, and you guys are just messing everything up from Civil War. And then now he's kind of like, oh, I'm sort of uncertain. I'm easily distracted and by what's going on in Busan. I don't know. It seemed like he was given too many weaknesses that didn't really fit, other than, well, they needed to have it in the storyline. But thankfully, with all of his shortcomings in this film, you had all of the amazing abilities and quick thinking and skill of all the other female characters that were backing him up. So it's just that I think maybe they nerfed him a little bit to give them more of a chance to shine. So you don't have Black Panther kicking everybody's ass here, and then Okoye is standing around with her spear just in case you need me. It really gave them more of a chance to do some amazing things while he just was off screen for quite a bit of this movie.
I also have to say, going back to what we had discussed about Marvel prematurely killing off characters, Killmonger, this was such an interesting character, and I really appreciate what you said, Brian, not necessarily villain but adversary, because there's a lot of things that Killmonger says that he's not wrong, however you look at it. His approach may be whack. The better written incarnations of Magneto, he has a point that can be argued, and some of those arguments cannot be disputed. And I thought out of all of the Marvel adversaries, this was the one that had the most color and the most interesting backstory. I thought Michael B. Jordan was amazing in this film.
Michael B. Jordan, obviously he's a lot of eye candy. But he did a really amazing job with this character because, again, you hate him massively for how he just comes in and just like, fuck this, fuck that, fuck everything, like a cat knocking glasses off of a counter. Burn the world.
Yeah.
But, when
Burn
you
the world.
see him have
burn
his
it all down.
sort of spiritual journey after he, ingests the magic orchid or whatever it is, and having that moment with his father, who somebody just told me actually is also the narrator at the very beginning of the film, who tells the history of Wakanda.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's the same actor, which is kind of cool. It's like, oh, that's neat.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that moment was really powerful. It was really well done. You're like, oh, now I kind of understand why he devoted himself to getting to where he was. The fact that he became an asshole about it, that's obviously, just the path that he took, but this is how he got there. And I like when Marvel does allow you to do that, and they do humanize some of their villains. They do have those moments in a lot of Marvel films where you kind of sympathize with them. And I think with this one, they did a great job. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. There's motivations. It's not just I'm.
You understand where he's coming from,
which I think is kind of a lazy storytelling trope that a lot of comic books in general like to go into. This person's evil because he's an evil person. Marvel films try to, get rid of sort of the cheesiness aspect of that and throw in, motivations and evolutions of this character into a point where it's evil, or maybe he doesn't see that he's evil. He's doing pragmatic good. But yeah, I was disappointed that they killed him off, because there is that possibility they could do so much more with him, because he never says that he never says that he was wrong at the end. He sees the beauty of Wakanda, but he never says like, gee, I wish I had just come here and stayed. And
there's no remorse. There's no come to Jesus moment. I also have to ask you guys, because the screening that I saw was 10:30 in the morning on a Friday. So I actually was one of the people who wasn't in a sold-out theater when I saw this film. I was really inspired by T'Challa's speech before the United Nations.
Oh, yes.
And I imagine in a packed house that you would have heard applause. Did you guys get that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there was plenty of applause.
Right. Steve, since you got the mic, why don't you just basically say what the core of what T'Challa said?
Well, basically, T'Challa came up and, this was their coming out. Wakanda's coming out on the world stage saying, hey, this is, we've sat in the shadows for too long. We've isolated ourselves, and we just can't do that anymore. We can provide help. We can, lead or partner more. He talked about partnership and, being an example without dictating ways to be, and we are advanced or we are superior. There was none of that. It was just we have things that we can definitely show the world. Different ways of doing things. We have can partner with everyone else and do what we can do to help alleviate suffering. And the joke at the end of that scene, of course, is where one of the other ministers of the UN is like, but wait, you guys are just some like poverty-stricken, bunch of farmers. Like, how is that possible? How can you help us? And of course, that's when they, there's a little grin, and well, we're going to reveal ourselves to be like a super highly advanced civilization that's light years beyond anything else on Earth. But just that speech alone is very anti-current American political climate. Or not anti, I would say like the reverse, where it's not, we put ourselves, it basically is, we put ourselves first for so long, and we really shouldn't have, because there's a lot of good that we can do in the world, helping people and being an example and, guiding them.
Right.
Building bridges, not
building
barriers.
bridges, not barriers. Oh, that
right.
was...
The button on the speech was that it is a wise man who builds bridges and a foolish man who builds barriers.
wonder if they originally said walls.
I'm sure that
Or
was in some version of the
That's
script.
too on the nose.
What's so funny though about that is none of that sentiment is bad in any time, I think.
I completely agree.
Take current events, and that's what even makes it worse, because you hold this really very normal, comfortable, wise, traditional saying that's been true for millennia, and you put it up against today's climate, and you go, what the hell? But yeah, in my theater, we had some people who said amen. We didn't have a whole round of applause. I was thinking there might be more.
Mm-hmm.
But can I also say that the outfits at the theater, different people had on traditional tashikis and other shirts. And again, it was so exciting to see that.
We had
Excitement.
So many kids who were dressed up as Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
So many kids, and Jason turned to me afterwards. He's like, "This makes me so happy."
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was the same thing when we went and saw Wonder Woman for the first time.
There's a lot of sentimental alignment with Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
Just being able to see something like this that has been such a long time coming, and I know,
and to see
Brian,
a particular representation at the forefront.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Brian, I know you mentioned Blade, but the one thing about Blade was that it was an R-rated film. It wasn't for kids.
Right.
And it was a lot more
same thing with Spawn. And there also is this argument that these are far enough away from the comic book films. There are elements that are so far away from superhero that I don't know if they really factor into the equation.
Yeah, there's a lot of sci-fi. There's a lot of I guess political and family drama.
And maybe if Steel had grossed more than $1 million, I don't know. Remember Steel?
Well, if Steel was a good movie, maybe, but Steel was a crap movie.
I actually
Meteor
don't.
Man.
I
Meteor Man was a big
hate
family
Steel.
film.
Well,
Really?
Meteor Man, Blank Man, they don't count.
Yeah.
I actually have some affection for Steel. I'll admit.
Well,
I'd rather watch Steel than Batman and Robin or Superman 3.
Okay, well, yeah. Low bar.
Yeah. Or Howard the Duck or Catwoman.
Okay, yeah.
There's some.
You're right.
It ain't cinematic greatness, but if you have to waste an hour and a half, I can think of much worse ways, and I just named 3 or 4 of them. Well, we are a comic book podcast, so we want to tie this into the comic book world other than just the character. We want to tie it in with the medium. So we each have a comic book storyline or particular issue that we're going to recommend to you to get your feet wet if you haven't read a lot of Black Panther in comics. And these are some of our suggestions. Now, since mine's earliest in time, I should go first, right?
Sure.
Okay. I don't usually go first, so this is new terrain for me. My recommendation for a Black Panther comic run doesn't go back to the very beginning, but close to the very beginning. As people may know, Black Panther was introduced as a supporting character in Fantastic Four, was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. His first appearance was in Fantastic Four 52. He very quickly was appropriated by Roy Thomas to become a member of the Avengers, and throughout the remainder of the 60s, that was where most of his exposure was, apart from guest appearances and other stories. The first time, though, that Black Panther had his own series was in the early 70s. There was a title, Jungle Action, which was initially reprints. Then Marvel had a recalibration of various titles, and this was one of them where they removed the reprint aspect and brought in original storylines. With a title like Jungle Action, Black Panther was a perfect candidate for the lead character. What you got was groundbreaking comics. The majority of them were written by, well, actually all of them were written within the Jungle Action run, were written by Don McGregor, and the art chores were handled by a couple of different people, primarily Rick Buckler but not the pastor, Billy Graham, an artist. Unfortunately, both of those artists are no longer with us. If you enjoyed what you saw with the mechanics of the Wakandan culture, a lot of that you have to give credit to Don McGregor. And writers recently like Christopher Priest have sung McGregor's praises in really, really beautiful terms if you want to check that points online. The storyline, which originally ran for 13 issues, is called Panther's Rage, and we basically gain an understanding of Wakandan culture. And a lot of the elements that you see in the film, the adversary of Killmonger, the various tribes within Wakanda, a lot of that is centered around the Panther's Rage storyline that occupied the first part of McGregor's run in Jungle Action. As the run goes on, we have a brief period where T'Challa goes to the Deep South and faces the KKK. And then we also have some fairly conventional superheroics toward the end of McGregor's run, which actually have his principal adversary as Claw. If you want to read this material, there are 2 points you can go to. One is the Black Panther Masterworks, the first volume, which collects the entire run of Jungle Action. You can also go to the Black Panther Epic Collection, Panther's Rage, which collects all the material as well, but also gives you his first 2 appearances in Fantastic Four. The run that McGregor had, the writing is far above most Bronze Age writing. Grant Morrison has cited him as an important influence, and in some ways the original 13-issue run has been referenced as Marvel's first graphic novel. And there is an argument to be made there because there is an arc there that is better suited to a collected run than it is to the individual book. So that's my recommendation. I didn't mean to go on as long as I did, but I had to because it's such a good storyline. T'Challa's original run in Jungle Action in the 70s. Brian, what do you have?
So I just thinking back, because again, like I said, I hadn't read a lot past the last 10 years. There's 2 writers who I think have really well defined Black Panther for me, and those are Jason Aaron and then Jonathan Hickman. Both are, again, fairly recent in the grand scheme of Marvel Comics continuity. And Hickman didn't do it in a Black Panther series as much as just throughout his New Avengers run and into Infinity and into Secret War, Battle World, Secret War, right? As all these events.
Secret Wars,
Secret
plural.
Wars.
Plural.
Yeah.
Secret Wars, plural. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
All these events kind of they all run together. But first of all, if you didn't read those series and you want to see some profoundly badass T'Challa, you need to go read that because it elevates him to something spectacular. But the one that I'm going to talk more about is the first one I read, was Jason Aaron's Black Panther Secret Invasion. So this was a 3-issue tie-in to Secret Invasion. That was, if you recall back, when the Skrulls were basically replacing superheroes and trying to come in and take over the Earth. It is Jason Aaron and art by Jefte Palo. I don't know what else he's done, and I don't think I've heard his name recently, but I'll tell you his art's sort of nice and Mignola-esque in certain ways. So I really do like the art style a lot. But this is a 3-issue series that really just tells the story of the Skrulls trying to invade Wakanda. I mean, it's a pretty simple setup, and this is the first time I really dug into Wakanda as a civilization. And seeing the awesome technology and sort of culture, even if very briefly and sort of broadly driven or drawn, was so amazing and transformative for what I knew about Black Panther that it definitely left a sort of an indelible mark in my head. And seeing this movie reminded me of the way Jefte Palo drew all of this world and everything. The other thing that's kind of cool in it is this is when Storm Ororo was married to T'Challa, so you get to see her and T'Challa fighting alongside each other against the Skrulls, having some pretty epic battles. In some ways, some of the battles reminded me a bit of the fight at the sort of towards the end of the movie between T'Challa, the other tribes of Wakanda, and then the Jabari, and then the other tech and Killmonger and all that stuff. Like there's some really cool battle sequences in this 3-issue thing that reminded me of that. But yeah, no, I really didn't know a lot about Black Panther besides just his random cameos and other things. I read that 3-issue series during Secret Invasion, probably just because Jason Aaron wrote it, and this was really early Jason Aaron too for Marvel. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I was just so entranced by it that I think every other time since, even the Tahani Coates, I'm probably saying his name wrong. It's Coates, I know, but what's the first part? It's Ta-Nehisi Coates. He has, from what my friends have told me who've been reading the series that he's been writing, he has really, really gone and done some amazing world building with the broader culture that was established, like you said, Bill, back in the 70s. So I'm really excited to go now back and sort of dig into those trades and really learn more about all of the cool culture that they've been putting out in these comics for years. And then the Christopher Priest run, I know, is also sort of one of those that a lot of people point to as, hey, this is the thing that the movie was. A lot came out of this run, and reading the wiki on it, you're like, whoa, I'm so glad they didn't use any of this.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little out there. I think Ross is it Everett Ross? He's sitting there like roommates with Mephisto. Like, what? Like, what? So yeah, that I would definitely recommend it. I bought it today off of Comixology app. I mean, you can find it very easily in digital form. 3 issues. I think the whole thing was $3.99. Totally worth it. Highly recommended.
All right, Steve, what do you got?
Well, like Brian, I haven't read a lot of Black Panther in the past. So when I was kind of, getting ready for our recording, I went back and one of the, I think, big relationships that Black Panther is involved in books that I've read is his relationship with Storm. And, obviously they were married for a time. In comic book time, who knows how long it was, probably not that long. They had a big wedding in 2006, and then had a big falling out / annulment. I don't think they were officially divorced, but they had their marriage annulled, or Black Panther annulled his own marriage towards the end of Avengers vs. X-Men, that crossover in 2012. So really probably about 6 years that they were together in real time. But I was always kind of interested in that because I had no idea where that relationship had come from, because Storm has had a huge career with the X-Men and has had, other relationships. She had a long-time relationship with Forge. More recently, she's had a very romantic or, primarily sexual relationship with Wolverine. Before he passed away, was killed, and then now he's back up, obviously. But so I went back to where they apparently first had that connection written about, and that was in Marvel Team Up number 100. John Byrne and Chris Claremont writing on that one. I think it was the backup story more in that one rather than the main story with Fantastic Four and Spider-Man.
And that introduced Karma.
It did, yeah. That was the one that introduced Karma. In the story with Storm and Black Panther, it gave their origin. Their relationship had actually started both when they were very young. Storm was actually only 12 years old. And she's trekking across Africa like you do when you're 12, wandering across the Sahara Desert and down towards, Central and Eastern Africa. And she ran across a bunch of white men attacking I believe he was 14 or 15-year-old boy. And, she, of course, jumps to help him out using her abilities, which had manifested at that time. And the main perpetrator, who is a South African agent of some sort. I can't remember the character's name right now.
I can't either. I just remember he was hot.
Yeah, he's this big beefy dude. He was the Bull, I think it was. Like, his nickname was the Bull. So he's this big beefy dude who was going to kidnap T'Challa and hold him hostage in South Africa, and then turn him into a puppet ruler so that they could have access to Wakandan technology and vibranium. And so Storm saves him and flies away with him, takes him back to Wakanda. And the continuation of the story, flash forward to the present, I guess 1980. She goes to enlist his help again because apparently they found the Bull, and the Bull is now living in New York, where they go and they confront him, and he ends up dying in the midst of that battle, or in that confrontation, I should say. And the way that it ends, though, is them parting. And the language that Chris Claremont uses here when he's writing about that relationship is that, they could have had something. It just says that in the narration. They could have had something. They had this recognition of, a life together that could have been, but it just wasn't meant to be because they're both, off doing other things. He's the king of a country in the Black Panther, and she's, one of the X-Men and is already flying around all over the place, or across the galaxy, So they can't have that relationship. What was interesting to me is I didn't realize that they had actually retconned that. So reading Marvel Team Up 100, I was like, oh, that's a really cool origin for it. But apparently they retconned it in 2006 in preparation for the marriage in Storm's miniseries, where they reversed it, where instead of her saving him, he saved her. It was the exact same situation. She was going to be captured because she was worshipped as a goddess, and they wanted to use her as sort of a puppet. But then he saves her, and they start the relationship then, and then of course rekindle it years later and end up getting married. I did not realize that, so I thought that was kind of interesting that they would do that to get them together, and I guess as a way of negating that sort of finality that Claremont had put in in that original story in Team Up 100, that they couldn't ever get together. And now, of course, they could get married. Now, it didn't last that long, so I guess the relationship just didn't make much of sense after all. But I do like that Marvel Team Up 100, and I thought that was really an interesting story that, too bad, unfortunately, doesn't count anymore in Marvel continuity.
They're all imaginary stories. They all count.
I know.
Okay. One thing I have to say, though, I really like your choices, guys, because mine was basically Black Panther in a bubble. The stories that you guys promoted were stories where he has integration within the Marvel Universe. And when you think of the character, he's introduced as a Fantastic Four supporting character. He becomes an Avenger. He marries Storm. They become members of the Fantastic Four. I mean, there's a lot of things that tie him to other characters. It was Wakandan technology that gave the Falcon the ability to fly. There's a lot of stuff there and a lot of ties. I mean, he even took over for Daredevil as the protector of Hell's Kitchen for a time. He's been around. So somewhere in the mix there, folks, there's going to be a Black Panther connected story that you're going to dig. Well, we're going to wrap this episode up, and when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up, we have a segment that we call the Woofs of the Week segment, where we highlight something, whether it be a comic book or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may enjoy sampling. So I'm going to go to Brian first. Brian, what is your Woof of the Week?
So I don't know if you've been watching the Winter Olympics, but a sport near and dear to my heart and my wallet and my existence has been getting a lot of attention as it does every 4 years. That would be curling, and I want to give two shout outs if I may. One to the Canadian mixed doubles team. The reason I'm even interested in curling is because one John Morris, a Canadian curler who captured my interest, let's just say, back in 2010 when he was on the men's Olympic team from Canada. He was half of the mixed doubles for Canada this year, and they won the gold and did very well, considering especially they were a team that was thrown together pretty much within a few weeks prior to the qualifications for the Olympics. Mixed doubles is a type of curling. It's fairly new on the world stage and the Olympic stage. It's brand new. So yeah, it was interesting. But the other shout I want to give is to the American men's team, John Schuster and his 4-person team, including another mixed double curler, Matt Hamilton, famous for his stylish mustache and comparison to Mario from Super Mario. People are thinking he looks like Super Mario, which I don't quite see, but whatever. John Schuster has struggled mightily over the last 3 Olympics to do well. 4 actually, but 3 is Skip, which is the sort of quarterback of curling. And they beat Canada, probably one of the stronger teams, although they've had better runs than this year. But they had an amazingly close game that I really enjoyed watching, and the American team pulled out ahead very last. It was in extra time, basically one last overtime end, and won. And I was rooting for both teams because they're both great teams from Canada, the United States, but I know John Schuster, regardless of whatever happens, going forward in the Olympics, I think that's one of those victories that he's going to treasure and the whole team is going to look back on and talk about for years to come. So there's a little bit of curling left, depending on when this comes out. And if you don't catch it live, all of the stuff has been pretty well documented on the NBC Olympics app, which is how I've been watching it. So if you want to go back and sort of see what you missed because you've been busy, and I don't blame you, you should go check it out and go watch some curling, and then go find your local curling club and try it yourself. That is what we are here for, and we hope to see anyone who wants to come curl out soon.
Okay, let's go over to Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
Well, I'm going to go throw it right back to Black Panther, the film, because I would be totally remiss if I did not mention the costumes. And the costume designer is Ruth E. Gordon. And if you were amazed at what she did in sort of creating this look of the different characters, not just the characters, but also the look in general of the the people, the Wakandan people, the different tribes, how everything had its own color, its own sort of symbolic pieces to it. Her work on this is amazing, and there's actually a really wonderful article that I do recommend reading by Dave Trumbore. I believe it's on Collider.com. About how she came up with the ideas and what kind of threads and inspirations kind of gave her the look of Black Panther, or allowed her to create the look of Black Panther. But if you are interested in costuming, and it's only by osmosis that I have an interest in costuming and other things in backstage production for a lot of these films, she actually has been doing costume design for years, and in fact was the costume designer, I believe, or one of the costume staff for most of Spike Lee's films. So she's been around for a while, and she has a very iconic, very African look, but also a very American look to a lot of her designs, and has taken that sort of and developed that over the past 30 years she's been in the industry. But I didn't realize this when I was doing some research on her. She also designed the costumes for one of my favorite sci-fi films, and I know that's a controversial thing to say, but Serenity, the Firefly sequel film. She designed the costume look for that. So if you haven't seen any of the Spike Lee films from 30, 20 years ago, that one you might recognize, where you may have seen her designs before. So Ruth E. Carter.
Okay. Well, my woof of the week is connected to what I did this past weekend. I was very fortunate to get a press pass for Toy Fair. And I shared pictures of what I saw and what I observed, and I'll probably put those on the Comic Book Bear site fairly soon. But the thing I wanted to talk about was something I discovered at Toy Fair, and that's a book, and it's called The Toys That Time Forgot, A Visual History of Unproduced Action Figures. It was written by Blake Wright. I was able to sit in on a panel that Blake had regarding the Kickstarter effort to create the book, what led up to the decision to turn this into a book, and he also presented some of the material that's found in the book. Book's a bit pricey, $50 plus $8 shipping. At some point I'll get it, but my woof goes out to it in the hopes that maybe somebody will buy it for me. In terms of what this book covers, this is the point where my co-host's ears prick up. Again, the book is dedicated to unproduced action figures. Some of these are lines that were never produced at all. Some of these are lines that were prematurely ended. Within the book, they spotlight things like the Dark Crystal figures that were set for release in 1985. Do I hear some ears pricking there? Yes, Hasbro had ready to go. They had gotten to the prototype stage, but even in failures, sometimes there is success because the main sculptor for the Dark Crystal ended up becoming one of the principal sculptors for G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. Other lines that were spotlighted were the Alien 3 3/4 line from 1979, the first time that there was this controversy of whether there should be children's toys for an R-rated film. There was an abandoned line for a film that is near and dear to my heart, Krull, that was basically because the company Knickerbocker Toys went out of business. Even some of the retro projects that had happened, like N2 Toys had a line of The Fifth Element that got squashed because of likeness rights. There was Palisades Toys, which had a very successful line of Muppet toys. They were all set to go for a line of Sesame Street characters, and then the collector's market of that particular end of the toy market collapsed. There were unproduced lines that blow your mind, like Mattel's Fleas and one series called Tribes. The graphics were amazing. So this is a book I really want to get. So that's my Woof, The Toys That Time Forgot, A Visual History of Unproduced Action Figures, Volume 1. Again, written by Blake Wright. There is no specific page for the book, but you can go to facebook.com/Toys That Time Forgot, and there is order information for that particular book. Well, thanks for listening. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to listen to us, you can do so through iTunes and through Stitcher Radio. And if you want to reach out to us, you can always send us an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Billy Z.
I'm Brian Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear Wolf and an Explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Wolf!
You important, you the moral to the story. You endorsing, motherfucker, I don't even like you. Corrupted man.